Hey, what is going on, you twisted tyranids? I just got back from Pittsburgh Regional Championships, from the Pittsburgh Regional Championships, the largest regional championships ever in the Pokemon TCG, and I did terribly. But my testing partners, Caleb Gettimer and Grant Manley, both had pretty solid runs. Caleb got top 16, and Grant unfortunately got 33rd, right outside of top 32. We ran it back with the Fusion Mew like we played at Worlds. We have a process that we apply towards every single tournament that we go to, every major tournament we attend, where we try and come up with what we think is the best play based on our discussion, our idea and thoughts of decks. Do we have anything that we think is individually very powerful right now that people are kind of overlooking? And then we have a spreadsheet that we run where we put in matchup percentages and how popular we expect decks to be, and that kind of spits out like a theoretical best deck as well. And we work with those numbers. We don't always just like pick the deck that spits out, but we work with those numbers to try and come to a determination of what we think we should play for the tournament. And we ended up with on Fusion Mew once again, which I think was a solid play into the tournament. But I think there's a lot of decks that are solid plays right now, to be honest. I still feel like Guardy is overall the best deck in the format. It has like the most 50-50s across the board. Other decks come up short in certain matchups. Mew is very powerful as well when people aren't playing Spiritomb and Drapion, but when they are, less of a powerful deck. And then all the other decks in the format, very good, but they do come up a little bit short in certain matchups. Kind of just depends on what you're going up against. But yeah, went with Fusion Mew again, and the list definitely changed quite a bit from the list that we played at Worlds. So the big thing is we don't have another one prize attacker in the deck. Did play the Ice Cube at Worlds, but we thought with the lack or probably the potential less amount of the Spiritomb that we're going to see, there's really no reason to play the Ice Cube. So we cut the Ice Cube. We didn't play the Oricorio or the Deoxys in its place, but I do think the Deoxys is pretty strong. John Ang played a Deoxys in their list to get top 32. And thinking about it, looking at the list, I do like the idea of the Deoxys. So that might be something I try out in future Fusion Mew builds, would be the Deoxys Fusion Mew build. Yeah, I did like the idea of the Deoxys, so I might try that out next time I pick up the Fusion Mew, because I think it is pretty powerful in some matchups. But yeah, no extra one prize Pokemon here. Just the Meloetta, of course, because Meloetta is the strongest of the one prize, the most potential to get yourself really far ahead in game. So just the Meloetta in this build here. And then the other things that we really adjusted around from like our Worlds list, or things that I talk about that we are including here, is, well, I guess one thing that stands out in general with this list and our list that we played at Worlds, we play a lot more ball search than most people's lists have, because playing the game is important, and we feel like having those extra balls in there, get yourself going on that first turn of the game is like a pretty big deal. So I got 2 Nest Ball and 2 Feather Ball. Sometimes I see lists only playing like 1 Nest Ball here and like no Feather. And yeah, no Feather, and then cut down to like 1 Nest. So it's like a 3 ball Pokemon search card difference, which is a pretty big difference, I feel like. At Worlds, actually, we played 3 Nest Ball, 2 Feather Ball. Felt like that was like a little bit overkill, so we cut it back just a little bit. Still a pretty high Feather Ball count, though, overall, in comparison to what most people are playing. Of course, like turn 1, it's not just about finding Genesects, it's just kind of about getting 6 Pokemon in play. Usually, you'll have, a Nest Ball, a VIP Best, an Ultra Ball, whatever, that can get the Genesect. And then if you have Feather Balls to get Mew Vs, that still works for just drawing cards to begin with and getting yourself going, which is super important for the Mew deck. It really sucks when you open like 2 Pokemon and you're like, all right, draw, attach, pass, or something like that. So just like Pokemon search cards in general are pretty important to getting off the ground in the early game with the Mew deck. So even if it's a Feather Ball that can't find a Genesect, it's still a pretty big deal overall. For the sport account, nothing really special here. It's a pretty standard Boss's Judge, Iono, Elsa Sparkle, Power Tablets 4, of course, Cram 4, Ultra Ball 4, VIP Pass 4, 1 Escape Rope, 1 Switch Card. Usually people are playing the 2 Switch Card, 1 Escape Rope. To be honest, 2 Switch Cards feels pretty comfortable, and the only reason I could see you wanting to play another Switch Card would be to have some more healing against the Lost Box matchups, and that actually is why we included the Crystal Cave here. Crystal Cave really good at healing your Genesects. After the Lost Box player, Greninja, uses Greninja and hits 2 Genesects for 90 damage each. You can put the Crystal Cave in play, heal 30 from each of them, and then even Switch Card heal another 30 off another Genesect, and then it makes it really hard for Sableye to go clean up that Genesect damage. So we expected Lost Box to be a little bit more popular at Pittsburgh than we did Worlds. We didn't include the Crystal Cave at Worlds. We decided to include it here because we're like, we wanted a little bit more outs to Paths of the Peak as well. Tina's path count was going up to like 3, 4. And then also Miraidon. The Path Miraidon build was starting to get really, really popular heading into Pittsburgh. So we're like, we want some more outs to Paths of the Peak. So we went up to a 3rd non-path stadium in general. Whether you call it the Crystal Cave or the Town Store, we cut one of the 2 Lost Cities, went up to the Crystal Cave to have a little bit of a better matchup against Lost Box decks. And then we did add in the Town Store as well, which I think is a super powerful card in Mew. because you have a lot of very powerful tool cards. 4 Sealstone, of course, getting you any card is pretty good. We still play 3-4 Sealstone. So the town store is usually not finding 4 Sealstone. We'll see a 4 Sealstone before we see the town store, but sometimes you see the town store first. The thing that I felt like synergized super well with town store and made a really big impact on the times that I did go up against Lost Tina, even if once again I ended up overall going 3-3 drops. So once again, did not have a great tournament run, but town store to find choice belts was a super big deal against the Lost Tina matchups, because getting the choice belt and getting it into play so you can actually like consistently take knockouts against Lost Tina is a pretty big deal. So that I felt a lot of power coming through the town store up against the Lost Tina matchup. And the other tool card in here as well is the Box of Disaster for the Guardy matchup, which is really powerful at, you know, just slowing Guardy down more so than anything. Are trying to set up, trying to be aggressive throughout the game, trying to take their big one-hit KOs. But if you get the Box of Disaster in play, you kind of slow them down for like a turn to have to deal with it or get around it, especially when you combo that with Judge or Iono, disrupt their hand, make it less likely for them to have like some big boss play or something like that, or maybe even the vacuum that a lot of people have been playing, take that away from them or make it harder for them to pull off that big play. Then leads to you kind of like buying a free turn, which is really nice. And the town store helps you find that as well. I think those are all like the major cards to really talk about in the list. Like I said, I think Future Mew was still a very solid play overall. Like I said, my tournament run, not great. My teammates, my testing partners had a pretty solid runs themselves. And I think Future Mew is still probably in a pretty solid spot moving forward. I think I put in A tier in my tier list before the tournament. Like I said, pretty solid play. Look out for it. As of course, I put a lot of decks in A tier. That has pretty solid plays. Definitely pretty good right now. Only the S tier. The only S tier deck I put in my tier list before Pittsburgh Regionals was Gardevoir. Moving forward, though, I guess things that I would change about the list. Like I said, I would try out the Deoxys. So I potentially look to cut maybe a 4 Sealstone because of the town store. I'd also kind of want to analyze how popular I expect Path to the Peak to be and how popular I expect Lost Box to be, because the Crystal Cave could definitely be cut. A stadium in general maybe wants to be cut as well. You maybe just want to cut a stadium if Path isn't going to be as popular moving forward. We saw a lot of the successful Miraidon lists at Pittsburgh Regionals not playing the heavy Path build, the 2 lists in top 8. I believe the list outside of top 8 for Miraidon weren't playing heavy Path to the Peak. I believe one of them did have like 1 Path to the Peak, but not like the 3-4 Path to the Peak that we had been seeing from a lot of people going into the tournament. People instead going over to the Beach Court build. The Beach Court build that Sage and Park has kind of popularized. A lot of people are switching over to that build. That build does have a way worse Gardevoir matchup, but it is overall, I think, a little bit more powerful of a build in terms of what you can do turn to turn and not limiting yourself by putting your Path to the Peak in play. And if there's not enough matchups where the Path to the Peak makes enough sense, it's better to kind of just go the more aggressive route with like that build I mentioned that like Sage and Park has been rocking for a long time, which saw the most success at Pittsburgh Regional. So if that's going to be a thing, if Lost Tina is really going to only be the Path deck, Miraidon's going to the non-Path build now, or like 1 Path. You can handle 1 Path. They're not going to get an out turn 1 that frequently. I could definitely see cutting one of the stadiums here. And if Lost Box is not going to be as popular moving forward, I could see cutting the Crystal Cave. Now, Angel Estrada did just win Pittsburgh Regionals with Kyogre Lost Box, but Kyogre Lost Box, to be honest, in my opinion, is pretty much a lost cause. You really have to go like more of an aggressive like Penny route if you want to beat Kyogre Lost Box specifically. That matchup is really tough for Mew. Now, if it's just normal Lost Box with like the Drapion, the Crystal Cave has a really impact on that matchup. Against the Kyogre build, the Crystal Cave is just cope at that point. So I would cut the Crystal Cave if we're expecting Kyogre Lost Box to be the deck moving forward. I'd always keep 1 Lost City around because it gives you a lot of outs against like the Guardian matchup and Lost Box to get rid of their Drapion, or any deck that plays Drapion. Lost owning the Drapion with Lost City is just too important. So if Lost Box is still going to be popular, but Path to the Peak isn't going to be as popular, which seems to be the way we're trending, I would probably cut the town store instead. Like I said, get the Deoxys in there, try that Deoxys out. Seems pretty cool. And you can always start to cut into the ball cards here a little bit. Like I said, we are a little bit heavy on the ball cards in this build, and I think you could start to cut back on them just a tad to make a little bit more space for any other cards you want to try out in here. But that's where I'd go from here with the Mew deck. Also, Box of Disasters, maybe not worth it anymore. If you have the 2-1 prizers, that gives you a different route against the Gardevoir as well. We can go like 1 prizer into 3 prizer, 3 prizer, or 2 prizer, 2 prizer, whatever it might be. Depends on how the game against Gardevoir kind of plays out. But Box of Disaster could maybe see cutting that out as well. And if Lost Tina becomes way less popular, I think you can cut a Choice Belt as well. Then you go down to 1 Choice Belt. Lost Tina is really the only matchups that Choice Belts are super strong against. Everything else is like, it's okay if I draw into it. Not that big of a deal. Even when you're looking at something like a Miraidon deck where you might have to KO multiple V Pokemon throughout a game, they have like 200 HP. And even if they get the Bravery Charm down, you have a Lost Vacuum. So it's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, Choice Belt, Lost is not going to be super popular, so we can cut back on the choice belts as well. So all things to think about when you're creating your Mew deck moving forward. But yeah, this is the list I played. That's where I'd go with the list. Let me know if you have any questions about Mew in the comment section down below, and I'll try and answer them, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.